recorded 2 weeks after the May 4th, 1970 Kent State shooting. Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young's protest anthem, "Four Dead in Ohio," quickly targeted the shock and sadness of the tragedy that day. Ten soldiers and Nixon coming, we're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming, four dead in Ohio. In the days preceding the shootings at Kent State, protests, disruption, and violence erupted on university grounds. Suddenly, college students faced the fate of being murdered by American soldiers and law enforcement officers on American college campuses. The shocking murder of 4 students by the Ohio National Guard at Kent State in May 1970 was one of America's most politically polarizing moments and had a profound impact on the Vietnam War protest movement across America. The Kent State shootings were a monumental event in the 20th century. 4 Kent State University students killed and 9 injured after the Ohio National Guard opened fire at college anti-war protesters. Numerous colleges across the nation were protesting the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. On April 30th, 1970, Nixon, the president at the time, sent U.S. troops to invade Cambodia, a neutral nation in the war west of Vietnam. The invasion was 5 days before the shootings at Kent State, with protests starting the day after the invasion. The invasion caused campuses across the country to explode with anger. American college campuses were now at war. Kent State quickly received international media attention, followed by an abundance of fear for many people. Disagreements remain as to whether the guard was under the threat and needed to open fire on the crowd. The 4 dead, Jeffrey Miller, Sandra Schuer, William Schuer, and Allison Krauss, all innocent, there to protest the bombing and invasion of Cambodia. The appalling shooting of 4 students at Kent State in May 1970 shocked the media and started a revolution of anti-war protesters. The event brought Vietnam soldiers home to a politically divided America. Vietnam War protests began small among peace activists and began to increase once college students started to voice their own opinions. Months before Kent State, there were violent protests at Harvard and Columbia influencing Kent State protests. Days after the shooting at Kent State, there was another fatal shooting at Jackson State in Jackson, Mississippi. Students not only protesting the war, but protesting the Kent State shootings. 12 wounded and 2 dead at Jackson State. These 2 events opening that political divide even farther. Kent and Jackson State's immediate aftermath led to more protest responses, sparking college student activism. College students continually being sent to war from the college war draft affected their own opinion about voting rights. From 1940 to 1973, men were drafted into the Vietnam War to fill vacancies that could not be filled by voluntary means. College students could not vote, which impacted the presidency. They wanted to elect a president that would end the war. College students were being sent to war despite being ineligible to vote. Young men in college fled to Canada to avoid the college war draft. The 26th Amendment was ratified on July 1st, 1971, granting citizens 18 or older the right to vote. Congress also reformed the war draft in 1971. The shootings changed the opinion of college students, which contributed to the rise of protests. Kent State also had a tremendous effect on college students becoming more vocal on a political front and protesting for their right to vote. The influence of the Kent State shootings on the Vietnam War protest movement became so prevalent in the 20th century. In the days following the shooting, 4.3 million anti-war and anti-government college protesters gathered at 1,350 colleges around the U.S. Kent State was viewed as the day the government turned its back on its young people in the nation who were supposed to be the political future. The shooting and aftermath were one of the most divisive moments in American history since the Civil War. The Kent State shooting is symbolic of the public opinion about war. 20 years later, a memorial was built overlooking the Kent Commons, built in remembrance of the lives lost on that day. Still today, the shootings are reflective through U.S. society and culture. The Kent State shootings had a tremendous effect on the Vietnam War protest movement across the United States and created a political divide between the people. Today's generation continue to fight for social change, to make a stand, to make our world a better place. Young people are fighting and protesting for immigration rights, gender equality, social justice. That's only a few of many. Flash forward to recently in Myanmar.
Our protesters were attacked with live bullets and tear gas. Innocent and hopeful young people being crushed by brutal events. These brutal events becoming more frequent with lots of disagreement between young students and their government, and a lot of times with the use of unnecessary violence by our government. The events in Myanmar being felt and seen around the world like 50 years ago at Kent State.